You are listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul. Our theme music is a clip of Summer Nights by the Eric Jones Trio. It's provided by our friend Mark Chesanout, who plays with the Eric Jones Trio every Thursday and Sunday at Good Times Jazz Bar downtown.
Hey everyone, welcome to Arts on the Air. This is Tamara Garvey, and I have the pleasure of sitting down with local artist Faran Riley. Welcome, Faran.
Hello.
So glad to have you. We're sitting in your lovely Sulfur Studio.
Yep.
I want to read a few words from, this is cute, your little description on your Instagram says, geology enthusiast, fine jewelry connoisseur, and aspiring surfer.
Yep.
I love this, like the three different pillars. It's fun. And then I want to read just a little bit from your bio on your website so people know a bit about your work. You describe your work as having as an illustrative style, combining intricate detail with loose washes of ink. And then in your latest body of work, you're delving into your subconscious to create images through a meditative drawing practice. Okay.
That might be slightly out of date.
Okay.
But actually, no, not really. I do a lot of almost like abstract imagery underneath my paintings, which have moments of realism and surrealism in them. So I kind of start with an abstract image. I do sort of like a really loose landscapey wash of ink, and then I just kind of play around with like how the ink settles on the canvas, like while it's wet, and then like once it dries, there will be these curves that I didn't really, it's like not really planned out.
Yeah.
And then once I get those washes down, that's when I start to, I liken it to carving almost. It's almost like the image is already there and I'm like pulling it out.
Yeah. Like delineating it.
Yeah. And then it's like, I do a lot of, kind of like light touching things, and so a lot of things are backlit, and so I'm just like bringing the light up and essentially carving the image out of these kind of like washy things.
Yeah, it is really interesting because a lot of like the process you describe is a lot like when people do drawings of charcoal, where it's like you may put down a really dark wash and then you use the kneaded erasers and things to like pull some up, so you're kind of doing that with inks.
Yeah. And I work with ink, with Sumi ink, black ink, and I water it down a lot. I mix in some other colors, and then I a lot of times use acrylic paint on top of the ink, and then on top of that I use colored pencil, and that's where I really get a lot of the like really luminous kind of nice textures.
Yeah, because you could do white colored pencil, and like white ink just isn't gonna, I know from experience too, it just doesn't actually come out white.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I save my pencil nibs, like they get totally like worn all the way down, and the things that are the most worn down are the whites and the light grays.
Yeah. You need those little pops for the moonlight.
Yeah.
Well, this is beautiful. So we'll talk about more specific about this. I'm going to kind of go in order, kind of through your life, and then we sort of arrive at like how you got to this current stage.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's interesting. You are from Savannah.
I am.
And went to Savannah Arts Academy. Is
that?
Okay.
Yeah. SAA, Savannah Arts Academy. I graduated from there in 2004. I was one of the first graduating classes, like the first classes to go all 4 years through that high school.
It was a new school then?
It was very new.
Oh.
It was a very small school, and I think that it's still pretty small. It's really hard to get into now. I would say it's probably a little bit easier to get into when I went there. But it's become this like crazy thing that's like in the news all the time. The kids are incredible and doing amazing things. But Emily Earle, the executive director of Arts Southeast and Sulfur Studios, we went to school together.
Oh.
Yeah.
I love that.
And we grew up down the
That
street
class.
from each other too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were you like even as a little child, were you already thinking you were going into arts?
My parents are both super creative, and that was kind of just, I mean, we didn't even really talk about like me being an artist, like as a career. It was just sort of like, that is what you're gonna do. It wasn't like, there's, you know.
That's so interesting. That's very unique.
Yeah. All I ever wanted to do was just like sit down and draw, and make things, and be outside and looking at nature and just like drawing things that I would see and experiences that I would have, and like I made a lot of little stories and did some writing, and
You were documenting.
Yeah.
So your experience at Savannah Arts, was it a lot of them teaching you like a wide variety of techniques and materials and things, or is it them sort of letting you just delve into what you want?
So surprisingly, I went to Arts Academy. I started like when I was in middle school getting into like community theater. And I actually like went to Arts Academy for theater. But I ended up doing lots of like set painting and set design stuff. And I did a little bit of the visual arts stuff, but that was not my main focus while I was there. But that sort of like got me into doing sculpture and like thinking about spaces. And so then when I went to college, that was like what became my art practice, was this like bigger thing. And I think it actually really had a lot to do with doing the like scenes and stuff for plays when I was in high school.
That's so interesting. So it's kind of by the time you were ending high school, you were not so much thinking about theater anymore, but more thinking about fine arts, and then you went off to a fine arts college.
Yes, yeah.
And you went to Boston for that?
I did. I went to another really tiny school called the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, which is now part of Tufts University.
Okay.
So I went there and I studied at Tufts and at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And it was a really intense school. It's very different from a lot of other like traditional universities or even art schools. There's no grading. It's a studio school, and at the end of every semester, it's basically like pass or fail.
Okay.
So you take all the work that you did during the semester, you put it up, and you get what's called a review board, and you get 2 professors and 2 students, and they basically like decide whether or not you're gonna pass or fail.
Do people ever fail?
Oh, a lot,
wow.
Actually. Yeah. And I like came close to it a couple of times and had like serious like mental breakdowns.
So it's not even just a matter of that you've like put in a lot of effort and a lot of work and have generated a lot of work. Like they're really...
Yeah, you have to be able to defend your ideas. And I always was pretty prolific. I made a lot of stuff. But the criticism is intense. And if, you know, really like, I mean, art is so subjective, right? It really would depend on like who your professors were and who your students were that were judging you, essentially.
Yeah.
So you had to be, there was some, you know, you did sort of get to choose, but it wasn't like you got to choose. It was basically like they would have these people, you know, blocked off, and you would choose from whatever was available.
Oh, interesting.
So I would hope that I would get, you know, a painting teacher, and I would hope that I would get a sculpture teacher together. But sometimes you'd be stuck with like someone who does film and someone who does watercolors or computer animation.
Yeah.
And then it's like those people are deciding whether or not you pass or fail.
Your paintings are successful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you have a lot of kind of like emotional ups and downs and like mental breakdowns during this college?
Yeah, I had one sculpture teacher who was actually really excited to have her on my review board tell me that my artwork was a bit of a one-liner. I'm using air quotes. And that I mean, to me, looking back on that now, I'm like, she meant that as a diss, and I took it as a diss in the moment, but now I think it's really funny. And like, when I was a little kid, I really wanted to be a cartoonist for the New Yorker. That was like one of my art dreams. So to be a one-liner is actually like, that's pretty perfect.
Right, like you make your point, that's it, and it's clear.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But I was doing some like performance art and installation and stuff, and my artwork, I think, always has a lot of humor in it, even though it can be kind of dark and like very subtle. There's creatures hiding in stuff, and it's I mean, it's very different from what I was making when I was in college, but where was I going with that?
You said for a while you were saying that you were doing some installations, and it sounds like it was very conceptual, a lot of it.
Yeah. I made like a diner in my studio that was like a 24-hour operating diner, and I got my studio mates to like all take shifts in it, and everything was made out of cardboard and like just, you know, kind of like touching on like what you think nostalgia is, but it's like not actually like made to look exactly like a Wurlitzer jukebox, but it's sort of like a suggestion of that. And we made pie and coffee and served it 24
It sounds
hours
really
a day.
fun. It sounds like a really fun program to be in, where you're just really playing and it's wild and it's not very career based.
Yeah, and
you're just like playing in art.
I mean, the great thing about that school is that they throw you right into experimenting with all the different materials, rather than taking 2 years of like drawing 1, drawing 2, and like you have a major that you pick and you have to stick to that. This is like, oh, you want to do woodworking and you want to do welding and you want to do like oil painting, like here you go.
So your degree at the end, is it just like called fine arts, or
it's just like a BFA when you graduate? Yeah.
Were you looking at like Marina Abramovic? I'm trying to remember date wise.
Abramovic.
Yeah.
So I started to hear about her more like after I moved away from Boston. I feel like when I moved to New York, she had just done that piece at MoMA where she was like, you know, sitting and people could
living
like,
there 24/7.
Yeah. That was like happening like right when I moved to New York, and
that was an exciting time.
It was. Like just like in the world in general, like people, it seemed like people who weren't really interested in art before, suddenly all these people were really interested in art.
Yeah. It's the kind of thing that makes big headlines and gets people talking about, what is this? Is this art? Can we still call this? And like all of society looking at that and thinking about it. When you moved from Savannah to Boston, how was that transition for you?
So my family is, both sides of my family are from New England originally. My parents were both born in Boston, and they both have roots also in Maine. And so one of the reasons why I didn't go to SCAD, for instance, because everybody asks me, why didn't you go to SCAD?
Right.
I was like, well, SCAD's going to be the same price as me moving to another city and going to art school, because at the time, and I think this is still true, they don't really offer any kind of like scholarships. Hardly, other than like you getting financial aid like outside of the school.
They do. I don't know if it would be full scholarships, but I had like a third of it.
Okay, good. I don't know, like when I was looking at SCAD, it seemed like it was like very minimal amounts, and I had tons of family in Boston.
Yeah.
And so I have like a whole like support group there. And I lived with a cousin for a little while, and so my parents were like, you should definitely like move to a city, but like maybe you're not ready to move like straight to New York.
Right.
Like, maybe go someplace where your aunties can come and rescue you if you need to.
It's a good halfway zone. And Boston is a really nice size also.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Boston's great. It's very walkable. There is so much going on there.
Yeah.
It's a very harsh environment. As far as like weather, and also the people are pretty harsh, but those are also my people. Like I'm all my relatives are from New England, so I already knew that they have
what
that like
going into.
grouchy, bitchy attitude all the time.
That's funny to go from to have like your family where it's both Savannah and New England, which culturally, it's very, very different as far as how like welcoming and friendly and chatty you are. But you liked that city.
I did. I had a really good time living there. I still have some really great friends from school, and I have no regrets. I do not think I would move back to Boston though. Okay. It's not my place.
And I saw on your website you had a while where you were a studio assistant to the artist Yunhee Min?
Yunhee Min.
Yunhee Min, okay.
Yunhee is a Korean artist who, she's one of these people who's like so incredibly brilliant that she has like multiple master's degrees, and she moved to Boston from LA, and she was going to the architecture school at Harvard for a master's.
Wow.
And she's not like an architect, she's like conceptual architecture. So it's like kind of art and theory and like just like super cerebral,
very like esoteric.
Like, yeah, exactly. And so she was in school for that and also teaching at museum school. And so she was my painting studio teacher, and she asked me to come help her with her projects for her school. So I started building architectural models for her. I actually like did a lot of her paintings for her. She would leave me instructions for paintings, and I would like make the paintings for her.
Her paintings are like these huge kind of like color wash, color block kind of things that make me think very 1950s abstract expressionist.
Definitely.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, she's got like I want to say like Ellsworth Kelly is probably like one of her biggest influences, and then Solowit.
And like Mark Rothko.
Definitely, yeah. But then there's like this element of architecture to it too, because she's like doing these like gel like panels like with color, and so when light comes through a window, it's like all about the color that it casts on the ground and the gallery or the space.
Oh, gel's like those thin plastic things on theater lights?
Right, yeah.
So it sounds related to what you were looking at.
Sort of.
Anyway,
yeah,
you liked
there's a thread running through all of this. Yeah, definitely.
So when you say that she would leave you instructions to do her paintings, what do you mean? like these paintings that she had on show in LA, like you had painted those?
Not quite those, but at the time I was doing she was doing these watercolor paintings where she had like a text that she wanted written across several pieces of paper, and so I mean it was somewhat easy for me to execute the paintings for her because they were like very specific like measurements and whatever, and she had like templates for the letters, and so I would just like copy the text and write it out across these pieces of paper, and then she wanted the text to have color to it. There were these stencils for the letters. You know those stencils where it's like if it's an O, the O can't be a total O in a stencil because otherwise like the piece would just fall out in the middle. Yes. And it's got the little slices in it. So
there's something that has to hold in the middle of the O.
So it's those kinds of templates.
Okay. It has a very typewriter font look to it at the end.
Yeah. Or you see it on like garage sale signs and things like that. So it's like that sort of text, and then I would get watercolor, and the letters would be, they'd have this like gradient, so it would go from like green to yellow.
Oh, wow.
And then the whole thing would be a gradient, like going towards, from yellow to blue. And
interesting.
They were really beautiful and very, very, very specific.
Yeah, she was very planned out.
Yeah.
What would you do if you made a mistake on her painting?
I have to start over again. Yeah. So I was like very careful with the stenciling. And she had gone through quite a few studio assistants. So I think I might have worked for her for a while. This was kind of hard to find people to like sit there and like execute this, but I'm pretty good at like really tedious tasks.
Yeah,
So,
just like zoning out.
Yeah,
and
I
working
can
on this
do
thing.
that, no problem. These days, my practice is so different. I actually have a practice, whereas before I was just sort of like flailing and like trying all these different things
Yeah.
and like trying to figure it out.
What was this when you were still in school or just post school?
This was while I was in school.
Yeah.
But I kept like, I dropped out a few times and I never really finished. I ended up just moving to New York instead of like finishing school.
Oh, yeah?
And I'm like 3/4 of the way through.
Oh my gosh.
And I still think like, is it worth going to school and getting a degree? I don't know if it is for me. Like it is for other people, but
Yeah.
I don't know about me.
So at some point it's almost like Boston was your intermediate, and then you graduated to like the big girl town, and you went to New York.
Yeah.
We were there almost roughly the same years. I was there
sounds like it, yeah.
Because you moved there in 2011, is that
I
right?
did.
I was there from 2010 to 2017.
That's so funny.
And I lived in Bushwick, and I did have a few friends
cool.
who were working as various like studio assistants to big artists, and they
Yeah.
were kind of they would always be in these industrial buildings like on the border between Queens and Brooklyn.
Yep.
And it was very interesting just hearing
Long
you,
Island City. That's
yes,
where everybody's
exactly, where there was
studio is.
space. But hearing you talk about this, it's funny. Like before I lived in New York and had friends doing this, I was never really aware that this was a thing that big artists did, where they hired young people to like execute this kind of real basic
Yeah.
rote work, like literally on their sculptures or paintings that were being displayed. And that the average person, when you go to a museum and look at art, you're never imagining that just some like kid in Brooklyn painted parts of it.
Exactly. I mean, working for Yunhee was really my first time being like, wait, you want me to make your painting for you? Like,
Yeah.
Are you sure you want me to do this? And she was like, you know, kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, and you kind of like, there's, I guess we all know that, you know, with the old masters that maybe they had like assistants who were painting parts of the bodies, and then the master
Totally.
painter came in and did like the hands and feet and the faces, I guess, like the really important
Yeah.
parts. But it's funny to think in the modern day that also just because the stereotype of artists is that nobody has any money, so the idea that somebody is like has so much better things to do and has the money to pay somebody to do part of their
Right.
art is still kind of mind-blowing to me.
Yeah. I mean, there are artists that like totally outsource their work. Like Hindi Wiley, his paintings are all made in China. And that's just like so crazy to me.
Is that
like,
part of the
like,
concept of his paintings?
Not really.
Okay.
It's just like it's something that a lot of people don't talk about or even know about, and it's wild. But I mean, if you look at his paintings, they're huge.
Right.
So there's a lot involved in that. And that's you know, he's not the only one that does that. That's like a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like Chuck Close also probably. I mean, physically is not able to paint. And
Yeah, these people who do these huge things where
Yeah,
just as far
yeah.
as like covering the ground of all of the surface area of something, yeah, maybe you need just multiple people
Yeah.
doing this.
Yeah, you
And I
do.
guess people who do big sculptures, like, is it Jeff Koons? I think maybe part
right.
of a lot
And
of
Jeff Koons is
his
not in
are-
there with a welder like making this stuff. No. Jeff Koons probably doesn't touch any of those things himself. He probably looks at them like, you know, at the foundry or whatever,
Yeah.
and like makes sure that it looks close to his vision. But yeah, he's not in the spray booth like spray painting anything or like sculpting really.
It's so interesting. Yeah, it's more at that level. It's like you're like the, you know, the creative director or something.
Yeah.
You're the designer.
But then it makes me think too about architecture and how like an architect doesn't actually physically build anything. They're like
Yeah.
drafting it and figuring it out. And a lot of times they have to work hand in hand with engineers that actually like make sure that this thing is, you know, actually buildable.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I learned that too, that in architecture they're not like there's still parts of the actual design part of a building that the architect isn't doing because it's just so specialized and so much to learn. So yeah, you also need the
complicated.
engineer to make sure that
Yeah,
it's
that
not
it's
falling
safe.
down. Yeah.
So then when you kind of like look at that, well, like, is an architect really an architect if they're not building anything? Well, yeah, of course they are. And I think that way about art too. I'm like, Jeff Koons is definitely an artist and his artwork is art, even though he's not making it himself.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's really different discussions as far as
It's still his idea and he just has the money to execute it.
Yeah, it's I love this. It just touches on also the more esoteric things like Marina Abramovic, or how she designs this performance, and then she maybe has other people who are coming in and out and doing it too. And it's just really different from the way, I guess, like your average thought about an artist is like, yo, you just sit down at a painting and you do your painting.
You have to make your painting from start to finish.
That's one aspect of it, but all these other things are also different ways of being an artist.
And like a choreographer isn't doing every part of the ballet by themselves. Like they're like, you know, they're the instructor, they're the creative vision, and then like the ballet is the show.
I always wondered about for choreographers, because they usually are like, they've aged out of being the ballerina themselves. Mm-hmm. So when they're trying to instruct the dancers what to do, are they able to physically do it and demonstrate it to them, or do they have to just describe it in words?
I think maybe I've always wondered about studio assistants that are younger and helping them, like,
like maybe they have an idea in their head of how they want this move to be executed, but maybe they themselves can't even physically do that anymore.
Wild.
Well, this is we're going to take, it's a good time for a little station break. We're going to take a moment. And again, I am with Faran Riley, local artist, and we will be back.
You are listening to WRUULP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.
Trees are one of Chatham County's most treasured natural resources. Beyond their beauty and cultural significance, the impact of trees are far-reaching and compounding, spanning from economic benefits to health improvements to climate change resilience. Trees are woven into every aspect of our lives. Savannah Tree Foundation protects and grows Chatham County's urban forest through tree planting, community engagement, and advocacy. More information is available at savannahtree.org. This portion of WRUU's programming is brought to you by listeners and by Brighter Day Natural Foods. Brighter Day Natural Foods has been serving Savannah's healthy food and supplement needs since 1978. It is located at the corner of Bull Street and Park Avenue. They have online ordering and curbside delivery available, and now a walk-up window for smoothies, juices, and sandwiches from the deli. They are open from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sunday. More information can be found at brighterdayfoods.com.
What does it mean when we say that WRUU is a community radio station? It doesn't just mean that we invite the community to create programming, and it doesn't just mean that we're a voice for the community. It also means that we're counting on the community to keep us going, and you are the community. Almost all of our modest budget comes from small annual or monthly donations from listeners like you. You get to enjoy our community-focused programming because many others have stepped forward to do their part. Now do your part by joining our community of listener donors. Go to WRUU.org right now and make a one-time or monthly donation. And thank you for supporting Savannah's community radio station, 107.5 FM.
Hey everyone, welcome back. This is Arts on the Air. I'm Tamara Garvey, and I'm here with Faran Riley. Welcome back, Faran.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
We're so excited to have you. And we're in your Sulfur Studios space. And I think when we went to the break, we were talking about just as you'd moved to New York, and it was 2011, and you were post-college. Did you have a day job while you lived there? What were you up to?
I did. I actually had the same job the whole time I lived in New York, with a little bit of like a 4-month break in the middle. I worked for a jewelry store, and one of the other things I did, like while I was in Boston in college, was I apprenticed with a jeweler because I thought maybe I was interested in jewelry too. And so I ended up getting a job as a salesperson at this sort of cult favorite jewelry store in Brooklyn called the Clay Pot, which was in Park Slope. And I worked there for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And
so you did become a real gemstone aficionado.
I did. I've always been interested in rocks, and I am also a bit of a magpie, so I just like little shiny things. And so I understood like how jewelry was made, and I had worked sales jobs like in college, like I worked at Anthropology, and so I understood like retail and that sort of thing. That lifestyle.
Was that hard? I mean, a lot of artists are pretty introverted, so how hard was it for you to to go to work full time and talking to people and selling?
Going back to my high school days and doing theater, I think as much as I hated acting, I really I thought for a minute maybe I should be an actor, maybe I should try that route. I was in a bunch of plays, I got cast in some pretty big roles. I really think that had a really big impact on the way that I speak and my ability to talk to strangers. I think it helped build a lot of confidence, and then I worked at anthropology in Boston, from my first year of college, and that store is one of the busiest stores in the country.
Okay.
For that chain. So I really had to be on my toes all the time. And then moving to New York, it was just the store is a tiny little retail shop.
Yeah.
A little jewelry box. With some pretty intense clientele. And I sold engagement rings and wedding bands, so I would be with somebody for a long time because it's a really big decision.
Yeah. And wealthy New Yorkers can be really intense.
Yeah. Intense for lack of a better word. Especially old school Brooklyn people. It was just a different world. I watched a lot of Seinfeld growing up, and I definitely have, I think that kind of shaped my sense of humor a little bit too.
Yeah.
I think it helped a lot. Yeah, I loved working there. I really did. And I feel really lucky that I worked there, even though I think, having this full-time job, it was a full-time job.
Yeah.
I didn't make art hardly as much as I should or could have if I did something else. But I think the job really taught me a lot about people. And having that really intimate interaction with somebody where they're making this huge emotional decision and also financial decision is a really interesting experience. And I think I learned a lot about relationships, romantic relationships, and also family, interpersonal relationships, and then how people interact with service workers and that sort of thing, because I definitely had some experiences that were enlightening to me.
Yeah, it's a certain class of person when you are the salesperson and you're selling a very expensive item, and so the people you're working with are very, very different from you.
Yeah, totally. So I got an education in gemstones and diamonds, and at one point I became the manager of the store, and I just kind of worked my way up through it, and then the pandemic hit, and that ended that. I ended up moving back down here, but that was 10 years that I did.
It's interesting how you said that you weren't doing a lot of art while you're there, because when I first moved to New York, I worked full-time too, and I had probably the first couple of years where I was really not doing art, just because it's so busy and tiring just to live in New York and live your life and get to know it, and then working full time. And I woke up one day and was like, what am I doing? I moved here to try to launch my art career and I'm not doing anything.
Exactly.
And,
I was doing that commute, where I would have to get to the Lower East Side of New York from Bed-Stuy, and that would take me up to an hour.
Yeah.
And so then that's 2 hours out of your day, and you got to go home and you got to cook dinner. And then it's well, I'm tired now.
And you had to carry your groceries home on the subway too. Everything is really tiring.
Do you have the this is another thing that I'm constantly reminding myself. I have this trauma of whenever I go grocery shopping, I'm always thinking about how much I can carry.
Oh yeah.
Even though I have a car now,
There's
and
a cart
it doesn't matter.
And a car. Yeah.
But I'm still when I'm unloading my car, I could do multiple trips, no problem, but I have to get everything in one go.
Yeah.
I have to. If I don't, it's the world is going to end.
I have a thing, I think maybe for the rest of my life, maybe I'll never be able to do this. I never get a buggie when I go to the grocery store. I get a basket.
Yes, always a basket.
I carry it because I spent you're trained to you have to be able to carry the stuff home, so you can only buy what you can carry around the grocery store. So I still only get a basket at a time.
Yep.
That's so funny. So yeah, I'd seen on your website, so when you moved to Savannah was 2020. And I was going to ask you whether it was just like dumb luck that you'd arrived here before COVID, or whether you had come because of COVID. Because
it was actually St. Patrick's Day that I left New York. The store had closed about a week before, and my boss was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to open back up. We don't know how long this is going to be. I'm just going to go ahead and lay everyone off so you guys can collect unemployment, which was a godsend. And then my dad called me crying and was like, you need to come home. And then my boss called me crying and she was like, you need to go home. So I rented a car and I drove down here. I was really scared to get on a plane.
Yeah. You were just by yourself at that time?
Yeah, I was by myself. I had just gone through a pretty gnarly breakup, and I was actually alone for the first time in my adulthood. I'd been with the same person for about 15 years.
Wow.
And we moved to New York together, and we had broken up in January of 2020. And so I really had like 2 weeks of living totally alone, no roommates. And everyone was really worried about me being alone. So I was really looking forward to it, and then that just got like pulled right out from under me.
So when you came back to Savannah, then I guess at some point you like gradually got back into actually making your art while you were here.
I did, and what's weird is like the last couple of years that I lived in New York, I had started making more and more and more. I was taking some drawing classes at the National Arts. Wait, am I saying that right? National Arts Club.
Okay.
NAC.
I don't know it.
It's in Gramercy, and it's like this really old school, like old New York institution.
Like in a brownstone kind of thing.
Yes, and it's like you could live there, but it's also like a club, like where there was like a restaurant and a bar, and then all these classes, like the National Pastel Club is based out of there, and it's one of these, you know, private clubs where you know, if you go to like a party there, you have to wear like a dinner jacket, that kind of thing. And I always thought like, oh, this is like a very misogynistic like place to be, but apparently like from day one they always allowed women to be there and like treated them as equals.
Was it from like the 1800s?
Yeah,
this place?
Yeah, it's been around forever.
Okay. And we talked a minute at the break where you said, and this, I'm sure this is just a thing unless you're crazy wealthy in New York, but you don't have a lot of space. So then you started working small. So you sought out this place to take drawing classes, and you imagine just working on some smaller pieces.
Yes. Yeah, and so like I was able to take classes there. It's kind of like an invitation thing, like someone, you know, invites you to come into it. I never became an actual club member because it's like, you know, thousands of dollars a year to pay dues to it or whatever. But it just helped me kickstart my interest in drawing again. And so then I started working on things at home, and I got this drafting table. I kind of invested in that and like carved out a little nook in my tiny, you know, 300 square foot studio. And I started drawing like crazy, and I was actually getting up really early in the morning before going to work. I would get up at like 6 and draw for a couple of hours, and then I would go to work.
Practice.
I am not a morning person. I don't know how I was able to do it, but but I felt like that was the only way I could do it.
Like after work, you're just too tired. You wouldn't have done it.
Tired. I'd be so drained. Like working with the public can be very, very draining. And some days I'd be energized after work and I could do some, but oftentimes if you get stuck with a crazy customer, it just like really takes it out of you.
Yeah. I mean, and we're sensitive, so.
Yeah. I'm a sponge too. I'm like a total energy sponge. Like whoever's around me, if people are like really, you know, excited and whatever, I pick up on that. But if people are like focused and down and just being difficult, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah,
I get
take that in.
Like, yeah.
Your work, so on looking on your website, there's like a section where I guess it's, you know, the kind of the older, like 2018-ish work. And so what you're describing, I guess this must have been the era where you were making these pieces that I've seen you display at Sulfur Studios before that I always loved, and I think if I have like old photos on my phone that I've taken you have this zebra piece.
Oh, yep.
The zebra, and then the background is like birch trees and they're
Yeah.
abstracted, and then
Yeah.
another one of a girl who's laying down, and it's in this
Yes.
like rocky moonscape looking thing.
Yes.
And I've taken photos of these pieces before. They were so beautiful, and they look like, so they're ink on Yupo paper, and they're pretty big, right?
Yeah, the zebras, that is Yupo, which is it's a plastic paper that has a little bit of tooth to it. That's I think 18 by 24 inches, so
Yeah.
like a good size
For drawing, that's like on
Yeah,
paper, it's kind
yeah.
of sizable.
And like the Madeline drawing, that one is probably actually a similar size. I had it framed really big, so it
Yeah.
had a lot of space around it, so it made it look bigger than it actually is. But it's probably like 14 by 20 or something like that.
So this
Yeah.
style, these materials that you were using during this class, how did you, like, is there a concept behind all this that was kind of tying them in together, or what were you thinking at that time?
I think that going back to when I was working with the architect, I really like tedious tasks, and I love really fine textures of mosses, and I was really like trying to make these like feathery textured things, and just kind of experimenting with like markmaking. I'm a very process driven person. I don't have an image in my head of what something is going to look like as a completed piece. I am like totally winging it the whole time. And so all of these things, I have kind of a vague idea of what I want to do, but I really don't know what it's going to look like until it's done.
They are really, when you zoom in closely, that it's tiny. It's like this old school pen and ink thing with little hatchings and little details. And
Yeah.
like you said, the girl who's reclining, when you look closely, it's like moss and lichen, and it looks very luscious. And your environments are like a mixture of looking realistic, but also kind of looking outer spacey
Yeah.
and imaginative. How do you, so if you're not really planning things from the beginning, the aspects of them that are very realistic, like this drawing of the girl or the drawing of the zebras, do you enjoy like this realism kind of drawing too?
Yeah, so that piece in particular is that's a real person, and that was I was doing a portrait drawing class at the National Arts Club, and that woman her name is Madeline. She is I think she's 4'10", and she's a model, like figure model across New York. I see her face and her body like in so many artists like New York artists, because people use her a lot.
Like the different art schools around New York?
Yeah, she does all the different schools, and there are a few artists that I follow that like I'm like, oh, that's Madeline. You know Madeline too?
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, she posed for me a couple of times, and I just really love how she's like a living doll, and she actually like in real life dresses like a doll.
Yeah, it's very Alice in Wonderland looking.
It is, for sure. And it's very strange because she is an adult woman who is just very tiny and like leans into her tininess.
Yeah, I thought this was a child that you had drawn.
Yeah, no, she is probably the same age as me. She's probably like mid-30s and maybe a little younger, but...
No, I want there to be an exhibition that's literally just every art, like all these different types of work of this one woman. I think would be a really funny exhibition.
There's an episode of the 99% Invisible podcast where they talk about this woman who was a figure model like in New York in the early 1900s, and how she was like, if you look at sculptures like around New York, like public sculptures and stuff, you start to see her everywhere because everyone was using this woman as a figure model.
Probably weren't a lot of people willing to pose
right.
It
was kind of scandalous. But yeah, Madeline, like I think she's the modern day whoever. I can't remember the woman's name.
She's everyone's muse.
Yeah.
That is so funny. I'd never heard of her.
Yeah.
And then the zebra. Did you like? Do you like kind of the juxtaposition of some element that's like really realistic, and then with the background is kind of abstracted and wild, and you can go off like these two aspects together?
I don't tend to draw from life usually, but Madeline was a special case because that was like I was actually going to portrait drawing class, and so I was really drawing from life. With the zebras, I had gone to the zoo and I took a bunch of photos of some zebras, and so then I was like kind of using those as reference. But if you really look at that picture, there's parts where the zebras are like really realistic, but then as it goes into the background, the stripes become more and more abstract, and you can't tell like which.
Oh yeah,
it's less defined.
Like the background and the foreground are.
Yeah, and so I love birch trees, and there's actually, my parents have this painting in their house of like a birchwood forest that has these like Native Americans riding horses like going through the birchwood, and it's like they're disappearing in and out of these really thin trees.
Yeah.
And I just love that image so much. It's so beautiful. And so I was kind of like thinking about that painting that I grew up with, and then these zebras, and like also zebras like do not live in birchwood forests, so that's ridiculous.
But they also like birches are usually white with black hatch marks on them, and then zebras as well. Like these repeating patterns for them. It's really cool. It's so funny to hear. I didn't know you were into birch trees, and a lot of my artwork is of birch tree forests.
Yeah, it is actually.
We actually have like a lot of overlap.
Yeah, for sure.
You have, just to like switch subjects entirely, you have a little section on your site where you have some pet portraits. It looked like you, around the same year as you were getting into doing those too. Is that like an effort to start getting some commissioned like paid work?
Yeah. Pet portraits are sort of like what pays the bills around here.
Yeah.
So I do pet portraits kind of on a case-by-case basis. I need... I don't work from photographs. Like, I'm not going to take one photograph that you give me and just like make a painting of that photograph. What I need to make a pet portrait is like multiple photographs from different angles, and basically I get like a perception of like what the animal's personality is like. I always try to get people to send me videos.
Yeah.
So then I can like really get a sense. Yeah. And then I make a portrait based off of like what I think the dog's like personality is.
Like an amalgamation. What is it? Is there some kind of aspect in your pet portraits that you think represents your style of painting? Like, is there some...
They're all really different. I think I've got... I work in a lot of different styles. I can do things that are more cartoony, and I can do things that are more realistic. And I kind of like playing with both of those things. So it really just depends on the personality of the animal, what I think would be the most appropriate thing for them.
Okay.
Because I've definitely done some like very regal looking like cat portraits with ornate like things in the background. And then I've done like some very silly like colorful like paintings of dachshunds. And,
okay.
Basic it's really kind of runs the gamut. Yeah.
And you have a few commissioned works. So it looks like you did some kind of repeat pattern drawings of gemstones and aspects of jewelry and things. Yeah. Is that stuff you got through your day job?
Yes, definitely. I started drawing jewelry just kind of like while I was at work in between clients, just kind of for fun, and I was drawing them on Post-it notes, and I could tell my boss was like getting really annoyed with me because I was like just drawing and drawing and drawing. But then some of the designers that we carried at the store saw my drawings and actually hired me to do like promotional material for them.
That's a dream.
So yeah, and now that's kind of like one of my freelance like part-time gigs is designing jewelry and also doing like little drawings for jewelry designers that I know that like kind of cute little drawings to add into their promotional materials and whatever.
Well, it's funny because a lot of your pieces now are landscapes and they are of the natural world, but you don't really incorporate a lot of rocks or gemstones into your current drawing.
So much. However, this the last show that I did, and I'll have to send you photos because you didn't come to my Curiosities show that just wrapped up a couple weeks ago.
I don't think I came. I'm sorry.
So that it was at Ology Gallery, and that's a new space on Bonaventure over by Claire and Co. I did a whole series of paintings based off of rocks.
Okay.
And so like all these things kind of like ended up getting like tied in together. And I had the show professionally photographed. So
So you got some great photos.
I got some really good photos, and I'll walk you through it when I can, probably next week.
Where is this gallery? Can you describe for people?
Oh yeah, it's 415 Bonaventure Road. So if you're going down Bonaventure, the kayak place is across the street. It's in the same building as like the old Savannah tours.
Oh, okay.
And it's very close to Bonaventure Cemetery.
How cool. Is this a new gallery?
It's new.
Okay.
And on the back of that building, you drive around back through a parking lot, a gravel parking lot. There's Claire & Co., which is a ceramic studio, and Claire of Claire & Co. took over the other side of the building and has opened this really awesome art gallery. It's a new space. I was technically the second show in there. The SIP show, the ceramic cup show, was there. That was the very first show in that space.
Very cool.
So yeah.
And we're kind of getting up to current day, but your pieces now are you have one piece that's bigger, but it looks like a lot of your work you have this particular size. They're like 7 by 10, which is very specific, but you do these you talk about on your website how you do your night sketches, and you take these walks, and then I guess you're drawing them later, right, from memory, and it's a mixture of, they look like real marshes, but also they look like sci-fi scenes that are imaginative. And they're very, like, you like this toned paper, they're very dark, and then there's little bits that are popped out with, I guess, like the white colored pencil.
Yeah, I really love coral and underwater scenery, and that was something that I used to draw when I was a kid all the time. I drew lots of mermaids and lots of like seascapes, so I still am so drawn to that, and I just love like the way light plays on things like at nighttime. So I'm like, I go on these walks and I look at like the moonlight and street lights and shadows and that sort of thing, and then I start to think about like in an imaginary world, like all these things kind of coming together. So there's a lot of like very corally looking textured things, and then also like the driftwood beach on Wausau or Little Tybee,
Jekyll Island.
Exactly.
So are they're not in each of your pieces, it's not a specific scene that you saw, it's an amalgamation? Yeah,
it's definitely an amalgamation. I spend a lot of time in Maine, in coastal Maine, and so there's a lot of like kind of memories from that too. I guess like ripples on water and like things that are like maybe submerged or maybe not. It's kind of hard to tell. Tide pools, that sort of thing.
Do you take photos when you're out walking?
I do. Yeah, I mean it's always difficult to photograph or to capture something that's really like particularly interesting to me. But the camera technology has gotten a little bit better. So yeah.
And we talked a little bit about the break. So your family, it's interesting. Like you're in Savannah, but then you also have this island off the coast of Maine that you can go to.
Yes.
So these two have really opposite types of topography and different types of trees.
Definitely.
In each, like in a painting, are you kind of merging these two different worlds together?
Yeah, I mean, obviously palmettos are like a big theme in my work. But then also these like really beautiful like conifer kind of like evergreen trees, and then in Maine the coastline is just covered in rosehip bushes.
Okay.
And so they're so beautiful to me, and I definitely like work those into a lot of stuff that I do.
And are birch trees in Maine, or is that more like
birch trees are like
Michigan?
I want to say, well, I've definitely seen them in New England. I think like Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, like in there. But where I'm from, or where my family's from in Maine, there aren't as many birch trees.
It's more the conifer, the pine trees.
Yeah.
I love the idea of in one particular piece just having these mashups of like these two really completely different types of foliage together is really fun to think about.
Yeah. It's really all about the texture and like what is satisfying for me to actually draw. I think that's the thing that drives me the most. It's like, you know, the viewer can like piece together whatever story they want to make about it, but I am like a very process driven person, and so I'm like, I just love drawing the pine needles and the coral and the driftwood, and then doing these like ripples of water and that kind of thing. So it's just like a satisfying meditative.
Yeah.
Art,
I think art is very, very similar, where from far away maybe it just looks like abstracted, like a pattern of color, and then when people get closely they see how many details
so much
there
detail
are
in there.
Yeah, and I really like, I do a lot of birch trees, and I like the way that the pen and ink is to do birch trees, and you like your colored pencils, and you like doing these little tendrils of plants. Yeah, it's so fun. I think we should collaborate.
I think so too. Well, I love too, like, because your pieces, they have a lot more color in them, and yours are really like light and bright, and there's a lot of like almost like, it's not quite negative space, but it's like brightness. And then I don't know, I think the two things would like work really well together.
Some of mine, like, it's not a real depiction of space. Like, it's not a realistic background or a realistic sky that would ever happen or anything. Yeah, I would love that. Let me think. How did you, this size that you do, this 7x10, is there a significance to that?
Honestly, I just had this pad of paper that was 7x10,
Okay.
and I don't know, I have never seen that size anywhere.
Right.
And I kind of like regret working on it initially, because it's not like I can just go out and buy like pre-made mats for that. I have to get them like custom cut.
Yeah.
So in the future, when I start a new body of work, I really think about like, is this going to be easy for me to frame?
Yeah.
Because this is really a pain for me to get
That's
framed.
really a thing to think of. Yeah, everybody I talk to who works on paper, it's a real thing to think about how to finish your work at the end and not bankrupt yourself doing it.
Exactly. I'm working on some actual paintings now. I've got I started doing some drawings and paintings of laundry lines.
Oh, it's very different.
Like really beautiful gardens with laundry line in them. That's just like a very nostalgic image for a lot of people. And then I collect a lot of rocks like while I'm in Maine, and I've been seeing these images in them. And so I'm like making paintings based off of the images that I see in the rocks, like little landscapes or even like figures.
That's so funny because people think about looking at clouds and seeing images, but
it's very similar.
Never think about looking at a rock and seeing something, but that totally makes sense.
Yeah. So that was what my latest show was. A lot of like rocks that I found that have figures in them, and I had the rocks displayed on pedestals, and then I had the paintings on the wall.
And your laundry line, where you talk about the nostalgia, I thought back to where in school where you did that project of like the old-timey diner. So you have this aspect to you as well.
Yep.
I love this.
Yeah.
And I guess then you can start to work bigger too, which can be fun.
Exactly. And now I have the space to work bigger, and I can really like go as big as I want to. And I love painting a big painting. So yeah, I mean, moving back to Savannah honestly is like the best thing that ever happened to me.
Wow, it's amazing. A lot of your work, when I look at it, I think like that movie directors could be using it as like their process drawings for like getting ready for shooting, basically. Like it looks like the movie Dune or something.
Oh yeah.
I feel like sci-fi movie directors could be using it.
Yeah. Well, if anyone out there is interested in that, please call me.
Yeah. Faran is available for a big time movie job.
I'm happy to do that.
Amazing. Well, this has been such a pleasure talking to you. Your work is so fascinating. Is there kind of anything you want to leave us with at the end? Or I love your words about Savannah. It's very beautiful. I love that that's the best thing that's happened for your work.
Yeah. I just Savannah is such an awesome place, and I'm so. I didn't really appreciate it as much when I was a kid, but I definitely do now. And one thing that I think is really important to say is that there's an awesome community of artists here who are so supportive of each other. And I never felt that sense of community in New York. And I think it's just because people are too busy, too preoccupied, too competitive.
It's very competitive.
Too paranoid, too whatever. And here, it seems like, even though it is a small town, people aren't as competitive. They're more, your success is my success.
Well, thank you, Farah. It was so nice
Yeah.
to finally, I'd seen you around and I'd seen your art and taken photos of your art before, so it's really nice to finally sit down and meet you. It's been lovely.
And I'm looking forward to getting to know you better.
Thank you. Have a great trip.
Thank you.
Next up on WRUU, That Old Savannah Magic from 4 to 6 p.m. It's a variety show featuring Savannah history, radio theater, interviews, and music.
You are listening to WRUU-LP, Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with a global soul.